Elsewhere, student Yoon goes downstairs to retrieve her belongings that were thrown out the window earlier and stops in front of the principal's office window and glances inside. She sees the principal has completely changed. He has transformed and turned zombie. The nurse has her back to him and cannot sense anything wrong. The principal rises and moves toward her. Yoon screams and tries desperately to warn the nurse, but the window is sealed shut, and the music inside is so loud the nurse cannot hear a word. A group of students boards a boat heading to a remote boarding school that can only be reached by sea. The journey is long and the open water stretches endlessly around them. Our main character Hania strikes up a conversation with a younger student named Chul, who immediately tells her the place has no cafes or entertainment, and he has no idea how they are going to survive 3 months out there. Hania agrees and tells him it sounds exactly like a prison sentence. She then tries to get the attention of a second student sitting nearby, but he completely ignores her and projects pure indifference. His name is Kim, and Chul fills Hania in on his reputation. Chul tells her Kim is legendary for his brawls, and that despite being outnumbered 20-1, he once held his own completely alone. Hania is impressed and decides she wants to be friends with him, and points out that even though she is a year ahead academically, they are the same age. Kim does not budge from his cool detachment and simply glances at her without a word. The boat pushes on across the open water until the island finally comes into view. It is rugged terrain covered in mountains and trees with strange formations jutting from the ground. The school itself looks ancient and weathered by decades of neglect. Inside, the principal is feeding his cat named Nabai when a soldier enters and tells him the expected students have arrived. The cat finishes eating and slips away. The principal greets the 3 students and immediately focuses more attention on Hania than the others and tells her she must be exhausted from the long journey. He then mentions that her father called and describes him as a highly respected politician and member of parliament. Hania responds with zero warmth and tells him she is not sure that is something to be proud of given that her father thrives off exploiting ordinary people. The principal tells her she is still a child and children do not understand what politicians do or how they see the world. He then turns to Chul and Kim and warns them both that any troublemaking results in immediate expulsion. He emphasizes that this school operates differently from anything they are used to. He asks Chul why people need school, and before Chul can answer, Kim cuts in and states flatly that he personally does not need it. The principal is visibly annoyed and asks Kim what brought him here then. Kim tells him honestly that he has no idea. Hania smiles. The principal tells them that is precisely why they need school, because self-awareness matters in school builds real human beings, and those who fail here will become corrupt and useless people who cannot even trust themselves. Kim stares him down and tells him he trusts himself completely. The principal laughs and leans in closer and tells Kim he seems foolish, but that in this place the principal is the absolute authority and everyone obeys. He snaps his fingers directly in Kim's face and dismisses them. He pulls Hania aside and tells her she can leave within a week if anything bothers her, and that she is welcome to use his computer anytime as long as she keeps it between them. Hania asks if her father requested this special treatment. The principal insists it has nothing to do with her father and that she is simply exceptional, and he expects her to pass along his compliments. Suddenly, the vice principal bursts in looking panicked and tells the principal to come quickly because a wild boar is rampaging through the school grounds. The real shock arrives moments later when they discover the beloved cat Nabai has been killed by the boar. The principal looks around and realizes Nabai was eating right there just moments ago. He grabs a weapon from one of the soldiers and storms into the forest to hunt the boar himself and take his revenge. He fires several shots into the trees but hits nothing. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Hania and her 2 companions are already frustrated with the food, which consists almost entirely of meat with no variety. Hania mutters that they never should have come. Chul asks her how her father accumulated so much wealth and what exactly he does. Hania tells him her father bleeds ordinary people dry. Chul says he wishes his own father had that kind of money. Hania tells him firmly that money is not everything. Back outside, a soldier moving through the grounds with his equipment spots blood on the earth and stares at it for a moment before continuing on. The wild boar then reappears from the exact same spot. Meanwhile, in the boys' dormitory room that night, a student named Tai is driven to the edge by Chul's snoring and storms over to warn him to sleep quietly. Chul laughs it off. Tai snaps and grabs him and hurls him off the bed and begins raining blows down on him relentlessly. Kim reads the situation in an instant and delivers a precise and devastating counter that drops Tai to the floor. Two of Tai's friends immediately jump in to defend him and charge at Kim. They are completely outmatched because Kim dismantles both of them alone without breaking a sweat. A teacher named Jin hears the chaos and steps in. The moment he enters the room, the students visibly freeze because his presence carries real authority and everyone in the building knows it. He demands to know why no one is asleep and reminds them he already warned them about this. Chul points out that Tai started it, but Jin turns on Chul and tells him he was warned to stay out of trouble. He grabs Chul by his rooster-like hair and announces that he is going to shave all of it off. He then slaps Chul repeatedly across the face with escalating force until his face turns red. Kim cannot stand watching someone weaker get beaten and steps in to physically separate them. Jin locks eyes with Kim and tells him to follow him. Jin then proceeds to beat Kim as well. Back in the girls' dormitory, Hania stands at the window smoking when her roommate joins her and takes the cigarette and smokes too. Their third roommate Dawn joins them but quickly notices something unsettling about the direction both of them are heading in and makes it clear she is not like them. The two roommates fire back at her and the argument escalates sharply. Dawn pulls out a blade and tells Hania to watch her mouth or she will use it on her. Hania does not flinch. Moments later, teacher Jin appears at their door and shuts the situation down with the same iron authority. Chul and Kim are locked inside a cage for the night, and terrifying sounds echo around them all through the darkness. They immediately regret the decision to come to this school. Chul vents loudly about every teacher in the building. Without warning, Jin reappears having heard every word. He shoves a stack of papers through the cage and tells them there is an exam tomorrow and they had better score well. When Chul erupts with even more attitude, Jin picks up a metal rod and slams it against the cage with enormous force until the noise completely breaks Chul's resistance. Jin then sneers at them and tells them the only reason he is here is to crush problem students exactly like them. He flicks his cigarette at them and walks away. In the cafeteria, the next morning, Tai brags to his friends about what he plans to do to Chul and Kim the moment they are released from the cage, and promises to break every bone in their faces and destroy them completely. A student at the next table interrupts and asks if they heard the sounds last night. The table breaks into a heated debate about whether the school is haunted by ghosts and spirits. One student at the table dismisses the whole thing and tells them to stop talking nonsense. Teacher Jin sits down beside the vice principal to eat when Hania finishes her meal and tosses her spoon onto the table and walks away without cleaning up her spot. Jin grabs her by the arm and tells her whoever eats cleans up after themselves and shoves her back toward the table. Hania completely ignores him and keeps moving toward the exit. Jin seizes her arm a second time and asks her directly whether she heard what he said and tells her to go back and clean her spot. Hania tells him she is not cleaning anything. Jin slaps her across the face with a pen and the entire room freezes and stares. Hania locks eyes with him and tells him to go ahead and hit her again. She shows zero fear and zero reaction. The vice principal steps in and pulls Jin back before the situation explodes, and the other girls escort Hania out before things escalate further. The vice principal then pulls Jin aside and tells him he cannot do that and demands to know whether Jin even knows who her father is. He makes it clear that the principal himself has given instructions to protect her, and that she is among the most privileged students in the school. Shortly after, the principal returns to campus in his expensive vehicle, but suddenly notices something and slams the brakes and jumps out. He discovers that the burial site for his beloved cat Nabai has been torn open and the cat has been mutilated and the ground is soaked in blood. He lets out a horrified cry, and the vice principal and another teacher rush out to him. Without warning, the principal takes off sprinting toward the school building, and everyone chases him confused. While grabbing the axe, he spots Chul and Kim still locked in the cage and asks the vice principal why they are there. The vice principal explains they caused trouble with teacher Jin the night before and were left there as discipline. The principal pays no attention to this and takes the axe and sprints back out, and the vice principal and another teacher grab weapons and chase after him. Back in the classroom, Tai and his friends harass one of the female students named Yoon and throw her belongings out the window. She snaps at them. The moment teacher Jin walks through the door, the entire class snaps to attention and goes dead silent. Jin looks visibly drained but moves to the board and begins writing equations. He calls on Yoon to come up and solve one. She steps forward and gets it wrong. Jin mockingly smacks her on the head with a notebook and forces her to stand at the back of the room with both arms raised as punishment. He then calls Hania up to solve a different problem at the same time. Outside, the principal and his two companions finally corner the boar, but everyone is too scared to get close and they struggle to land a strike. Back in the classroom, Jin calls on Dawn to come up and solve a problem as well. As Dawn works at the board, Kim suddenly experiences a disturbing hallucination in which the board cracks open and blood begins seeping through it. The vision disorients him completely, and Dawn loses her concentration because of the disturbance and gets the answer wrong. Jin punishes her the same way he punished Yoon. Outside, the principal trips and stumbles badly, and the boar closes the gap and sinks its teeth into him. The bite is immediately dangerous because the boar carries an infection. Back inside the classroom, Jin starts insulting and degrading the students with escalating cruelty, and Hania refuses to stay silent. She confronts him directly and asks how he can call himself a teacher when he treats every student with violence and physical abuse. Jin is stunned that she dared to challenge him and asks what gives her such confidence, and points out that her father may be a member of parliament, but that title belongs to him and not to her. He closes the distance and grabs her by the hair and delivers a brutal strike across her face, and tells her she needs to learn her place and speak with proper respect. Kim watches for exactly 1 second and then launches himself at Jin and drives a devastating kick into him. But Jin is significantly stronger and hurls a desk at Kim, then seizes him by the head and slams his skull into a desk repeatedly, and throws him to the ground, and drives multiple blows into his stomach. Chul watches his friend get destroyed and cannot take another second of it, and grabs a chair and blindsides Jin with a strike that shatters bones across his face. Meanwhile, the vice principal and the other teacher race to reach the principal and try to get the school nurse to him as fast as possible. The two of them argue and blame each other for failing to protect the principal. The vice principal orders the other teacher to run and call an ambulance immediately. The teacher rushes to the infirmary and is stunned to find a pair of long legs dangling off the side of the bed next to the principal. He looks closer and sees teacher Jin lying unconscious with his head wrapped and bandaged. The teacher curses Jin for abandoning them when they needed him most and says the principal might have been fine if Jin had been there. He tries to call an ambulance but cannot reach anyone. He finds the principal suddenly awake, and the principal tells them he wants to go back to his office. The teacher returns and tries calling emergency services again from the landline, but still cannot get through. Meanwhile, the principal is already behaving strangely and asks them to play some music. They turn it on and watch him close his eyes as if drifting off, and they step out of the room completely unaware that he is in the process of turning into a zombie. The school nurse heads in to give the principal his remaining medication. Meanwhile, Jin tears the Roman IV drip out of his own arm and throws it across the room and forces himself upright. Elsewhere, student Yoon goes downstairs to retrieve her belongings that were thrown out the window earlier and stops in front of the principal's office window and glances inside. She sees the principal has completely changed. He has transformed and turned zombie. The nurse has her back to him and cannot sense anything wrong. The principal rises and moves toward her. Yoon screams and tries desperately to warn the nurse, but the window is sealed shut, and the music inside is so loud the nurse cannot hear a word. Yoon sprints back to the classroom and screams at everyone that the principal has lost his mind and turned into a zombie. Nobody believes her at first. Inside the office, the principal grabs the nurse from behind, and the nurse finally sees his face at close range and collapses in terror. She cannot escape in time, and he attacks her and bites her. The entire class pours out of the classroom in a dead sprint with Yoon and the other teacher leading them. Teacher Jin appears directly in their path and blocks their escape and orders everyone back to class. The students desperately try to make him understand that there is real danger everywhere and that they need to flee right now. Jin refuses to listen and grabs one of them and beats him to force the whole group back into submission, and drives everyone back inside. Without warning, another teacher staggers out from the direction of the principal's office with blood streaming down his face from a bite wound. Moments later, the nurse bursts through in her transformed state and lunges directly at teacher Jin. Jin fights back and hurls her to the ground with full force and charges into the principal's office. The zombie nurse snaps toward the students and gives chase. Everyone scatters in terror and flees back to the nearest classroom and barricades themselves inside. Jin comes face to face with the principal, whose entire face is drenched in blood from the attack on the nurse, and realizes the transformation is complete. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, the vice principal is sitting down when the infected nurse enters the room in her horrifying state. The vice principal abandons his seat and sprints out without a second thought, and watches the cafeteria worker get bitten on the neck as he runs past, but does not stop for even a moment. He runs straight into the students in the corridor, and they tell him that everyone has turned and that people are biting each other and spreading the infection. He tells the group to move fast and find teacher Jin, because Jin is the strongest person in the building and the only one capable of protecting them. Yoon spots the teacher who was bitten sitting quietly nearby and alerts the vice principal to check on him. The vice principal approaches cautiously to see whether the teacher is all right, but without warning, the teacher snaps his head up and mutters that he wishes he had never come here. Everyone bolts. They find the nurse and the cafeteria worker in the corridor feeding on someone in a grotesque scene. The whole group retreats and piles into a nearby classroom and seals the door. The vice principal tells everyone they cannot stay here and need to reach the upper floor immediately and hide in the storage area. He orders Tai to sprint to the principal's office and use the landline there to call the police. Tai stares at him in disbelief and refuses to walk out into the middle of all those creatures. The vice principal points out that someone needs to lead the students to the storage room, and he is the only one who can do that, so he genuinely cannot go himself. Kim steps forward without hesitation and volunteers to take on the mission. Hania watches him go with visible worry and fear gripping her completely. Night descends over the school and the zombie population multiplies rapidly and begins shattering windows to reach the students. Everyone bursts out of the classroom and runs. Dawn makes a critical mistake and hides behind a door in completely the wrong spot and comes face to face with a zombie inches from her. Kim reaches the classroom and presses his ear against the chalkboard that he previously hallucinated was bleeding. He hears nothing from that side. He hears terrifying sounds from the other direction behind him, and fear overtakes him and he backs away and slips out. The vice principal escorts the remaining students toward a relatively safe location, and Hania grows increasingly desperate with worry about Kim. Yoon provokes her and tells her if she is that worried, then stop driving everyone else crazy and go find him herself. Hania begins piecing together what is actually happening and asks how a person transforms like this from a single bite by a wild boar. She concludes it is an infection, and that this appears to be the first outbreak anyone has ever encountered, and that it is extraordinarily dangerous. The vice principal is asked where the wild boar even came from, and he blames himself for the state of the island, which is overrun with boars. He reveals that years ago, a massive storm triggered a catastrophic event that somehow transformed every boar on the island into a zombie. The authorities had no solution and buried thousands of infected boars in a mass grave and covered them with soil. The outbreak had lasted 3 days, and the boar carcasses were completely inedible after death, and blood had soaked the entire island from the animals tearing each other apart. Yoon tells the group that if any of them get bitten, they will turn, and she does not want to die. The vice principal agrees they are in a genuine catastrophe and must act immediately. He also starts blaming himself and the principal for everything that has happened, and even lashes out at teacher Jin for locking students in cages, and criticizes every teacher for treating students with contempt and manufacturing conflict. Hania stops him and tells him this is not the time to fight among themselves. Chul jumps in and argues with him as well. Meanwhile, Kim reaches the principal's office alone and finds the music playing by itself with no explanation. He brushes it off and rifles through the desk drawer searching for a phone to call the police and finds one. But before he can do anything, the zombie principal shuffles in and drops into his chair, and makes unsettling movements with his face. Then Kim freezes as zombie teacher Jin enters the office in his terrifying transformed state and spots Kim through the mirror's reflection and launches at him at terrifying speed. Kim manages to confuse and evade him and escapes by weaving through the building. Back with the rest of the students, the group argues about how to survive, and Tai keeps provoking Yoon with cutting remarks. Yoon fires back and tells him he had better hope he is not the first one to turn. The vice principal cuts through the bickering and demands they function as a single unit. Suddenly, there is a knock at the door and Kim appears. They throw it open and drag him inside. Hania rushes straight to him and pulls him into a tight embrace, overwhelmed with relief. Chul immediately asks if Kim was bitten and tells him not to infect anyone. Kim assures him he was not bitten, but admits he nearly did it to himself from sheer terror. Yoon asks about Dawn and her voice drops when no one has an answer for her. Kim hands the phone to the vice principal and they all attempt to contact the police, but the signal is dead and they cannot reach anyone. Frustration blankets the entire group. One student points out they need to find food before anything else or they will simply starve to death. Yoon announces she absolutely refuses to die in this place. Kim grabs an axe and walks out, and everyone draws courage from his decisiveness and arms themselves and falls in behind the vice principal. Tai and his group split off to hunt for food while Chul and Hania and Kim head toward the classrooms. They hear zombie sounds dangerously close. Hania tries the phone again, but still no signal and no connection to the outside world. Yoon asks the vice principal what the first thing he will do is when they finally escape. She says she is walking out of this wretched school the moment she is free, and the vice principal tells her he was thinking exactly the same thing. Kim then tells the group the only real solution is to get off the island entirely, but that is going to be extremely difficult to pull off. Chul announces he is going to the infirmary on his own to search for supplies. The others want to come, but he tells them 3 people moving together will create too much noise and draw attention, and insists on going alone and tells them not to worry. Meanwhile, Tai and his friends are thrilled to find a stockpile of food and sit down to eat enthusiastically while one of them starts singing. One student announces he needs to use the bathroom and heads off alone. Tai brags loudly that if any zombie even thinks about approaching him, he will destroy it instantly, and they have nothing to fear. What nobody notices is that the student who went to the bathroom is already being dragged across the floor by a zombie and gets bitten, while the rest of the group sits completely oblivious and eats. Without warning, zombie teacher Jin and the zombie nurse burst in and tear through the entire group and bite everyone except Tai, who manages to break free and sprint away. Back where Kim and Hania are waiting, Kim turns to her and tells her after they get out of here he is never setting foot in another school again and declares he is done with education entirely. Hania insists that education matters and that he needs to continue. Kim tells her he has always been a failure and that he is perfectly fine with being one. He then takes her hand and tells her he loves her and asks her to leave this place with him and get married together, since the least they can do is guarantee their own happiness. Hania tells him this is hardly the moment. Without warning, a zombie punches through the chalkboard directly at them, and the whole group explodes out of the classroom and races back to the vice principal and Yoon. Shortly after, Chul returns and dumps out a bag of medications and tells them that is everything he found. At the same moment, Tai comes face to face with the zombie nurse and tells her she is giving him a headache and finishes her off. He then discovers an electric flare and grabs it as his new weapon and goes to work on his infected former friends and dismantles them with savage efficiency. But the zombie principal arrives and the infected close in around Tai from every side, and he is overwhelmed and cannot hold them all off and gets bitten, but remains conscious for a short time after the bite. He pounds on the door until Chul spots him and tears it open, only to find the zombie principal right behind him. The vice principal drives his weapon straight into the principal's heart and drops him instantly. Suddenly, Tai begins to turn and lunges toward Yoon, but Kim catches him by the throat in time. Hania prepares to finish Tai, but stops when she sees him staring directly at her with what looks like a flash of his former self breaking through. At the same moment, the vice principal is locked in a brutal struggle with the principal and keeps driving him back, but the principal keeps coming relentlessly and bites Tai a second time. More zombies flood in and everyone fights back with everything available. Yoon gets bitten despite fighting back hard. The battle rages and blood covers the entire area. Hania smashes zombie skulls with a hammer, including Teacher Jin, and breaks through to rescue Kim before he gets bitten. Chul rips the eye straight out of a zombie standing directly in front of him and stares at it in his hand. They try to reach the vice principal, who has collapsed, but discover his head has been completely destroyed and the sight is incomprehensible. In the middle of the chaos, the school soldier appears dragging his equipment and senses immediately that something is deeply wrong. He grips his weapon and braces for anything. Only Hania and Kim and Chul remain alive in the entire school, and the three of them break for the exit. The soldier tells them to take the vehicle and drive while he covers them, and he charges forward to clear a path by blowing zombie heads apart. They locate the vehicle, and Kim sprints toward it, but zombie teacher Jin intercepts him and hurls him to the ground. Kim scrambles to avoid getting bitten, and Chul tries to reverse the vehicle back toward Kim but hits a zombie at full speed, and the impact flips the vehicle and sends it rolling with both Chul and Hania inside. When Hania regains consciousness, she is stunned to realize Chul is no longer beside her, and a zombie is already clawing at the window. She grabs the hammer and drives it directly into the center of the zombie's skull until it collapses. Kim is still fighting Jin off until he spots an axe lying on the ground and grabs it and buries it into zombie Jin's skull with enough force that there is no coming back from it. Kim races to the vehicle and stops cold when he finds Chul sitting beside it crying after being bitten. Chul tells him he does not want to turn into a zombie and begs Kim to end it before the transformation takes him. Kim is shattered and tells him not to give up, but the change has already begun. Chul reaches the point of no return, and Kim does what Chul asked. Kim then searches desperately for Hania and calls her name over and over until she appears suddenly from behind him and tries to bite him. He shoves her to the ground and is devastated to see she has turned. He refuses to hurt her, and when she comes at him again, he wraps his arms around her and holds her tight and feels her settle slightly. She turns her face toward his neck. Without warning, a shot fires and she drops into his arms with a bullet through her skull. The soldier appears from behind but is immediately grabbed by a zombie from behind and bitten. Kim weeps over Hania in complete devastation and cannot accept what just happened. He picks up the soldier's weapon and storms into the classroom where the haunted chalkboard has been the source of everything and finds monstrous faces pressing through its surface. He opens fire and blasts every single one of them, and blood erupts and pours out of the board and floods the room. He finds the zombie principal and shoves a grenade into his mouth and runs as fast as he can before the explosion tears through the building and the entire area ignites. Kim then goes to find Hania's body and sits beside her grave in silence and grief. He is then seen dragging something heavy on a chain as he boards a boat and pushes out into open water and thinks back through every memory of Hania and Chul. He returns to the mainland, dragging behind him a cage, and inside that cage is Chul.